Hey guys, we are at the National Heirloom Exposition in Santa Rosa, California, and I'm here with Baker Creek's Master Seed Saver, Shani McCabe, and we're going to talk about the 4 tips to seed saving.
I'm so excited to share with you some essential tips to a successful seed harvest. Saving seeds is so important. It saves you a lot of money. Year after year, you can save your own seed. You can do your own little breeding projects as well. So if you'd like to save seeds because you really liked a variety particularly, you can adapt that variety to really hone in on your microclimate and grow really well in your specific area by saving the seeds year after year. And you can even get further with it and start developing your own traits, selecting for different colors, shapes, and sizes or flavors. So I really encourage everyone to get started with a little seed saving this season and then ramp it up for next season.
So today we're going to give you 4 tips to seed saving, and everyone grows tomatoes, so we're going to start there.
So here's a great beginner crop for seed savers. If for a beginner seed saver, if you want to get started on something easy and something that everyone loves, try an heirloom tomato. One of the best reasons to save heirloom tomatoes is because tomatoes are typically self-pollinating. Those flowers are not going to readily cross-pollinate in the field. So you can expect that you're going to get a stable variety when you save those seeds. So I just want to show you the technique for saving tomato seeds, because they're not like beans and they're not like any kind of like a corn where it's a dry seed saving. This is called wet seed saving. So I know you've done it before. It's pretty easy.
And a lot of people do have questions. A lot of them are like, oh, I don't know how to do tomato seeds. I don't understand it. It really is a very simple process.
Yeah, it's totally simple. It's not to be intimidating. So let's try this solar flare tomato, because you want to bring this home and eat this, right?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so
yeah, I don't have any of those. I'll have to try that.
All right, so Doug and Stacy are going to have some solar flare tomatoes for their garden next year, so we want to save these seeds. So I've got it overripe. First thing that's important, picking a tomato that's slightly overripe. This one is soft to the touch, it's kind of mushy. That means the seeds inside will be quite mature. So what you're going to do, and I'm just going to get my hands dirty, because that's what gardening's about. We're going to just squish that pulp and we're going to release those seeds. Yep, and this isn't a particularly seedy variety, but I'm just going to get all those seeds out as best I can. So this is wet seed saving tomato seeds. So we've got our tomatoes and our pulp all mixed around in here, and we're going to let it actually ferment for a few days. What you could do is cover it with a paper towel if you'd like. That would probably be best to keep the gnats and things away. But we're gonna give it a few days to really get ripe. And what it's actually doing when it's sitting there fermenting is it's breaking down a germination inhibitor that is naturally present around the seed coat of the seed. So this is going to make your tomato seeds really pop next spring when you start them. So this fermentation process is essential for good germination rates next spring.
And one of the cool things that I learned when I had moved out, when we live around the Amish, is they get the tomatoes, and generally you could get a tomato like a bigger one like this, a slicer, and then you slice it just like you're going to put it on a plate and eat it. But I would put it on like a tray of dirt or a pot of dirt, and you just put the slices, and I spread it around, even like you're making a pizza, and then you put it in a dark place, like down in a basement or a crawl space. Don't water it, don't do anything, and basically it is fermenting the seeds. And then when it comes time, early spring, I'll go ahead and start watering them, and then you'll get hundreds of little bitty tomato plants, and then you pick out your good ones, and then you go ahead and put them in the pots, and then you can start raising them, and it's amazing how easy it is. So easy too.
So I'm going to show you more the way that I learned, I should say. So we just spread the seeds, and this is post fermentation. We've let all the nasty pulp float to the top. We've scooped it off, and we've just got our seeds, and we're just going to lay them out on the paper towel and allow them to dry. We're not going to put them in direct sun, but we want some good airflow wherever we're setting them, and they're going to dry out on the paper towel just like that. And then we're going to get to how we store them over the winter. So when we harvest our seeds for storage, we just want to make sure that we get them ready for their long storage season. So that means drying the seeds out. We've got crops that are wet, like the melons and the tomatoes. These are wet crops. We're gonna make sure that they dry out. So if you have a crop that has a moisture around the seeds, be sure to get them to dry out. No direct sunlight, indirect sunlight, good airflow. That's going to get them to dry fast and remain viable. You got things kind of in the middle, like peppers, not quite wet, not quite dry, but still very simple to save those seeds. Just set them along on the paper towel to dry. They should dry in just a matter of minutes.
Now we're going to start with cross-pollination and isolation, and what a better place to start with corn.
Exactly. So it's an appropriate place to start with corn because corn is especially susceptible to cross-pollination because it's pollinated by the wind. I'll take it back a few steps. You've got different crops and they are pollinated through different means. You've got tomatoes, those are self-pollinating predominantly, and they are also pollinated by insects. You've got crops like squash, those are also predominantly insect pollinated. But then we have crops like corn, and that's wind pollinated.
Yes.
Right, so it's super easy to get cross-pollination in your corn because it's just the pollen is moving all around from the wind. So one of the most important elements to avoid cross-pollination is to know about isolation distance. Isolation distance means how far apart do I have to grow my crops in order to ensure that they're not going to be cross-pollinated. There are different techniques that we can employ aside from isolation distance to ensure that we don't get cross-pollination, because I know a lot of you out there are home gardeners with not a lot of space. But first, let's talk about isolation distance. Okay, so you're going to want to go online or find a resource like a great resource is a book called Seed to Seed by Suzanne Ashworth. But what you're going to want to do is get yourself a chart of isolation distances. That's going to let you know how far do I need to plant my beans from one another to make sure they don't cross-pollinate. How far do I need to plant my corn? Corn needs to be planted, it can be planted up to a mile, they can cross-pollinate, but things like beans can be grown in concert with one another without a real risk of cross-pollination. So getting yourself a resource like a chart or a book to find out the isolation distance is essential.
Cross-pollination, well, we grow a lot of popcorn at our farm. So can you kind of talk about, is there cross-pollination between popcorn and just, other corns?
Yes, indeed. In fact, one of the most biggest concerns is that corn, GMO corn, for things like field corn, are grown all across the country, and they're ever present in agricultural communities and even in suburban communities. So there's a great risk of cross-pollination from some big corn farms right nearby. So one of the best ways to avoid cross-pollinating, because yes, indeed, a popcorn can be cross-pollinated by a sweet corn, can be cross-pollinated by a dead corn. All of the corn varieties, they can be cross-pollinated. So what you're going to want to do is employ a caging or bagging technique, and you can find a little bit about that online. Rareseeds.com, we've got resources teaching you how to do caging or bagging, but you're going to need to actually isolate your corn using a physical barrier because there's so much corn grown across the country and that pollen is just blowing around in the wind.
So let's talk about how easy it is to save it.
Right, so dry seed saving, things like corn, things like beans, super duper easy. All you're gonna do is allow the plant to dry naturally in the field, and then you're going to just pluck the seeds. Now these corn seeds have been shucked off of their cob, and we can save them maybe in a glass jar or a plastic bag over the winter. But you can also just leave your corns right on the cob and just plant them the next season. You can shuck them the next season.
And that's what I do. I keep the whole corn cob, and then I just pull off the seeds and I plant them. That's how we do it.
Pull them off as
Another popular dry seed are beans, and they're so simple and easy to store.
Yeah, dry beans are a great dry seed saving project, excellent for beginners. They're super easy because they're not readily cross-pollinated. They're predominantly self-pollinating crop. They're easily saved. You just allow the beans to dry on the plant outside. If you're expecting some wet fall weather, you can also bring them in and hang them in the window to let them dry further. But really, it's as simple as pulling these from the shell and storing them in the fridge or in your cool, dark, dry place for the winter. Super easy to seed save, very easy to keep from cross-pollinating. And who doesn't love a good mess of beans to eat in the winter or to save for the next season?
Totally, and I love to look at them when they're in your fall garden, how they're hanging, they're drying. It just looks beautiful.
Yep. So we've talked about isolation distance, avoiding cross-pollination, techniques for seed saving, whether it be wet harvesting or dry harvesting, and now we're gonna talk a little bit about how to store your seeds. So whether we harvested those seeds using a wet method or a dry method, storage is always going to be the same. Just remember, when you're storing your seeds, these essential tips, they have to be kept dry, they have to be kept cool, and they have to be kept dark. No direct sunlight, no ambient humidity, no moisture, and no heat. So a refrigerator is a great place. You can even store them in the freezer. But what's essential is to keep the air moisture away from them. So a glass jar, a Ziploc bag, a paper bag, just be sure to keep the direct sunlight off them. Don't let them be too moist, and don't let them get too hot.
And you store them in the refrigerator or the freezer. What's a trick so they don't get damp or moist?
Maybe a double bagging would help, a really tightly sealed glass jar. Keeping them as dry as possible is essential because that fridge will get moist, or you probably use a root cellar because you guys don't do fridge. So,
and this is the year we're gonna do it. We're gonna pack ours up and put them in the root cellar.
Amazing,
Yep.
so you're doing it old school style.
Yep.
So keep them dry, whatever means that you can. Double bagging is probably the best way, or a good tight seal in a glass jar.
We've learned how to store our seeds, whether they be wet or they be dry, and what's gonna happen in the spring when I'm ready to take them out and plant them.
Right, so for most of these easy annual crops, it's as simple as pulling them out of your cold storage, letting them warm up for a few hours or a few days, just outside in your house, and sowing them. However, there are some crops that require stratification. Those are mostly perennial seeds, or a few different crops that are kind of specific, maybe some flowers. And you'll know to stratify those varieties because it'll say on the seed packet when you initially buy those seeds. So stratification can be as simple as putting your seeds in the refrigerator or the freezer, or just sowing the seeds outdoors before the last frost date to get them exposed to a little bit of cold. But stratification is typically something that's more popular with perennial seeds.
So on the seed packets, usually it does say, you know, you need to stratify them, and many people have no clue what stratification is. And a lot of times they're not successful planting or growing something, and it's because of that, right?
Right, so people see the word stratify or stratification, they don't know what it means. Essentially what we're doing is we're replicating winter. So you get that seed pack, it says stratify, that means put it in the freezer or put it in the refrigerator. It will typically tell you for how long it needs to stratify, whether it be 6 weeks or 6 months, but we need to recreate winter for that seed to trick it into germinating again in the spring, because it needs to feel like it went through a cold period.
Right.
So simulate that with the fridge or the freezer, and be sure to read the back of the packet to let you know the length of time, but that is what stratification means.
So if you guys have had problems with your seeds germinating, it could be because they didn't go through the stratification process, especially with biennials and perennials. And the cool thing about seed saving is it builds community.
Absolutely. So we're here at the 2019 National Heirloom Expo at the Seed Swap. This is North America's largest seed swap. We just handed out 15,000 packets of seeds, and that doesn't include what the seed swap participators have traded
that they
amongst
brought in,
themselves.
right.
So this is an incredible way to build communities. It's essential for food security. This is keeping the seeds in the hands of people.
And I hope you guys enjoyed our little tips for saving seeds here at the expo.
Yep, and I hope to see you guys at the 2020 National Heirloom Expo. That's in Santa Rosa, California, and that is the first week of September. So see you there.
See you guys.